So hi everyone, welcome back. So this is going to be a follow-up video to our introduction to Java objects and classes. And I'm going to do this by expanding a bit of the previous example we saw where we started building basically a university application. And we're going to now break this out into multiple files. It's actually going to be two different classes, two different Java classes. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into object-oriented programming, okay? So let me just kind of give you a little bit of the structure, what we have to start with, and then we'll kind of go from there. Okay, so first, I want to point out that we've got two files now. Okay, each one of these represents a different Java class. We have the main.java and we have student.java. Okay, and they're both listed in this same Java package. Okay, because they're in the same package, as long as I have the package name listed up here, okay, they are both visible to the other. Okay, so I can basically use one class inside of the other. So here, for example, I'm creating an object, right? An object called Adam, which is of type student. Okay, student being the class, Adam being the object. Okay, and then remember that new student is actually allocating heap memory allocating it dynamically while the program's running, saying, hey, make room, make space to store this object of type student, okay? And then just to recall, I don't actually need to free it, all right? That'll be done automatically in a process called garbage collection by Java, okay? Now, we have this main class here, and inside the main class, the only thing I have is this main function, okay? And it's calling, right? It's creating this object Adam of type student. And if we look in the student class, I did change things a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna add to this momentarily, and we're gonna kind of hack this example a little bit. We're gonna change it up. We're gonna do a couple things to kind of illustrate some new points. Okay, that I'll get to momentarily. Okay, but first let me kind of give you a breakdown of what we're looking at. So here we've got this class student. Okay, and it's got a bunch of data members, and I actually expanded these quite a bit. Okay, I expanded these out. We've got the ones that we saw last time, first, last, age, GPA. I've also added some, this grades array. Please note the syntax here. Okay, the syntax here, this is an array of grades. So imagine, it's a little bit of an oversimplification, but imagine that each student can have 10 grades assigned, okay? And these are letter grades like just A, B, C, D, E, right? And I'm going to allocate on the heap space for 10 characters for each one of those grades, okay? So I can do that right here, right? And then I'm keeping track of how many grades have been assigned because maybe you only have 1 or 5 out of the 10, okay? And now I want to illustrate something that in the previous example when we were talking about objects and classes, we didn't really get to the point where we started really differentiating them too much from what a class is in Java versus what a structure is in C, okay? And now we're going to start doing that because what I want to illustrate here is that unlike structures in C, we can have methods, right, which are functions that are embedded in our given class, okay? So these functions here, right, often referred to as methods within the student class, these all operate on what it means to be a student. Okay, so if I want to display a student, for example, okay, I can use this method here, and what this is really doing is it's encapsulating, right, not only the data of what it means to be a student, right, that a student might have a first name, last name, age, GPA, and grades assigned, right, but also it encapsulates, in addition to the data, encapsulates functionality, right? These different functions, these different methods that operate on the data or operate on that custom type that we've created, okay? So for example, if I want to display a student to the screen, I can define the rules here of how we want to display the student, okay, in one location, okay? There are a couple big advantages of doing it this way. Okay, one big advantage is that this allows us that if we want to change at some point how we're displaying a student, we can change it in one location. Okay, so for example, if we have a default way we want to display a student and we decide that we want to change it, if we've got a very, very large application, we don't want to have to change that rule in like 20, 100, 200 different places. We'd rather do it in one location and have that rule take effect everywhere. Okay, so one main advantage for having, or one big difference between a structure and a class is that not in addition to the data that they both have that builds a data type, classes allow us to have this functionality that is also contained within it. Right? Let me show you an example of using it. So here I'm using it we're using dot notation to display things out. I could, if I wanted to, take this line out, okay, and now just say Atom dot display. Okay, so I have this object, right, and I'm going to display the data, right. Effectively, what's going to happen is that is going to call this method here, this function here, and it's going to use the data for that Atom object. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this. Okay, let's just give it a second to compile. Right, when I hit build, I'm compiling it, just like we're doing with we did with C. And we're going to give it a second, and I'm going to run this. Okay. And notice here I've got it's being displayed down below. Okay. If I wanted to change this rule, I can change it. Like for instance, if I didn't want that extra space, I could change it in one location. And this is going to work, right? Obviously, I can do things here. If I wanted to, I can create a different student, right? So a different object of type student. Oops, not dot Jones, dot last. Okay. And I'm going to display both Atom and best information. So a couple advantage of this, right, is that we're able to make the code. Notice that this code looks a lot more readable, right? It's also what we're doing is we're building reusable code. That's a big, big thing of object-oriented programming is we're building code that's reusable. Okay, we can reuse these functions, right? And it makes it very easy that I don't even have to pass in. Notice I don't have to pass in the data as input parameters into that display function. That's already available over here, right? When we initialize the object, okay, that data is already available, okay? Now let's take this a little bit further and let's learn a little bit more about how this works. Like that's an essential aspect of object-oriented programming, right? Reusable code. But let's take this a little bit further and let's look at some other big advantages for having object-oriented programming. Okay, so I'm going to do something where let's imagine that we want to have the GPA here, okay, dependent on the grades that are assigned. Okay, let's take it let's take it one step at a time. Let's imagine that we want to allow the someone to assign a grade, like a new grade. Okay, so I might want to create a new function, and I might want to say, or like something like assign So maybe we want to have something for assigning a grade. And what I can do here, right, is we can use this grades array that have been defined previously. Okay, and that's going to just add that's just going to add another grade at the end of the array, right? We're just going to keep adding a grade at the end of the array as we do that. Okay? We could also have some logic in here that says, like, for instance, maybe if we only allowed a maximum of 10 grades, right? That if we had something like num grades, like if the current number of grades, right? If it's since we're starting count at 0, if we get to 9, right? We've basically we don't have space to store anymore, and we can include our logic in here we have our logic for doing some sort of error detection. Now, that might be silly, that be like, well, wait a minute, why you wouldn't really assign grades that way, that you just have 10 or whatever. It's meant to be a simple example, right? Imagine we only have space here for 10 currently, and instead of having it go beyond the bounds of the array outside the maximum level, we're going to display an error, okay, and then return so that we never go beyond the end of the array, okay. Okay, so actually look at this, right? We probably want to say, well, 9 is the last place that we can set. So we're going to say if it's beyond greater than 9, right? Greater than 9, because we still have space in that 9th location. It's only when this becomes 10 that it's gone too far. Minor point, just that was off by 1. Okay, so we could use this, right? And we could say, well, all right, maybe we've got this example we did before here, and let's just stick with one student for now. We could say, hey, we want to assign a grade to Adam, right? Notice this dot completion stuff using the IDE, that in this case NetBeans, is super helpful. We're able to recognize here that there's this functionality, right, or this function is here that we can use, okay, and maybe we're assigning Adam an A, maybe his grades are something like, he's done quite well, we're going to assign Adam three grades, okay, and I could do something like this now. Let's go ahead and let's display all his grades. I could go ahead and do that, right? I'm putting a space after each one so that they don't just bunch up. And let's compile and run this. Okay, and notice, actually I did with the end of line, so that's why they're in a row. If I drop the ln, they would be on the same row. We could see all the grades that were assigned. Okay, well, that's great, right? We're able to do that, and we're learning a little bit about how to access things, right? Now, let's take this example a little bit further, okay? And let's look at how we can make this a little bit more effective in terms of how we want to, say, assign a GPA, okay? So what we're trying to do here is, let's have the GPA dependent on the grades that are here, okay? Right, so let's make something called okay, and what we want to do is we want to calculate the GPA based on all the letter grades that were assigned, okay? And what we're effectively going to do is we're going to kind of do the opposite of what this function that I already previously wrote was, which was this one here is if the GPA is blank, it gets the letter grade. Okay. Let's do let's make another function that this one's going to use that, given a letter grade, assigns the GPA. So I'm going to do this. Okay. And I'm making these up. I don't know if these are the real ones. I'm just kind of making some stuff up. Okay. So, we're getting a little hint from the IDE. We could make this a switch statement if we wanted, but whatever. It does the same thing. So here this is just taking a letter grade and converting it to the GPA, and we could use that as part of this calculation, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a for loop. Okay, and what I'm doing here is I'm converting this grade that's a letter grade, okay, I'm converting it to the associated GPA, so I'm literally calling this function, okay, we're summing it up, all right, and we're going to take an average, right? Okay, now I think the num grades might be, we probably want to do a little bit of error checking, because we want, if somebody called this when there was no grades assigned, it would be a divide by 0. But let's worry about that later. Okay, and then we're going to return average. Okay, so notice this is going to calculate the average of all the grades, and it's going to return it from a GPA perspective. Let's test this. Okay, let's go back here and let's just do something like oops, we already got the GPA. Okay, excuse me. I could have done this, by the way, I didn't have to pull this on 2 lines. I could have replaced this here and moved it right here, and that would have been fine. But let's test it. Let's see if I made a mistake. Okay, and we can see that that looks completely reasonable, right, based on the grades that were assigned here, right? I mean, like I said, but I made up the conversion. It's not correct, but it's just for an example. Okay, so now I want to I don't want to make this video go too long, but I want to get at a point here. So one of the things that we're doing, just kind of back up a little bit, is I'm showing you how, when we are using classes and objects, how we can be using some functions that operate on the data that belongs to that type, right, to that class, right? And particularly there's the the data that is, so Adam here, right, we have these grades assigned, right? We have this functionality of how these grades are being assigned, okay? And we are, at the same time, right, we're populating that data, we're like setting this data, and then we're retrieving the data we want based on that later on. And we're doing it through these methods, these functions that belong to that class, okay? Now, one thing we want to, there's one limit, there's one kind of caveat to this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the problem here, but I'm not going to fully flesh out the solution. I'm going to leave it to the next video just to try to keep the video somewhat short. One danger for this is, right, of how this is currently built. And I'm going to set up the problem and then I'm going to recap it in the beginning of the next video. Is that, okay, we've got these methods here for assigning the grades, okay? We also have this method here for retrieving the GPA that's based on that grades, okay? But some programmer, you could potentially make a mistake, whether intentionally or accidentally, where somebody could do something along the lines of, well, let's do this, right? Right now, there's two ways to get the GPA. They can someone can use this method, right? Somebody could also do something like this, right, to get this GPA from the object. And if I run this, right, we're going to see that they have different values, right? They've got different values because one was set up here like this, and the other was set based on using this method. So that's clearly wrong, right? And you might think, well, the solution to that is get rid of this here. Get rid of, just say, okay, don't allow somebody to set that. Just go ahead and remove that. Okay. And then maybe here, instead of having that be displayed, if we want to leave that the same, we could have this function call get GPA, right? And remove this one too. Okay. So maybe we do that, right? Maybe we go ahead, we just remove it. Now somebody couldn't accidentally have this, it wouldn't be ambiguous that there's two different ways to get the GPA. Okay, that sounds great, right? That actually moves things in the right direction. However, right, it doesn't solve a problem. It doesn't solve a problem that there's still two ways to assign the grades, right? Somebody can assign a grade here using this function, right? Somebody could also go in here and do something like this, right? Or maybe maybe Adam doesn't like this B here, right, and wants to change it to an A, and is somehow somewhere else able to, right, that this is able to get changed, right? So there's two ways of assigning the grades, right? You've got using this function here, and you also have this here, this being able to do it this way, right? That makes things kind of confusing. It also makes it more likely that some sort of mistake occurs, okay? So what we're going to wait, I'm going to wait till the next video, is how we can lock down control and access to things so that the only way that we can basically, we can have a lot of control of what's able to read or write to certain data members, okay, of a class. Okay, what's able to read and write to certain data members of the class so that we can have a lot of control over what's happening. But I don't want to go too deep into it now, just kind of setting it up for the next time. And for now, you know, keep in mind, you might want to watch this multiple times, right? Keep up with Zybooks, keep up with all the material, right? Practice, 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 and I will see you in the next video.